Recently, outgoing Attorney General Eric Holder asked for a moratorium on the death penalty because after several botched executions, he says the lethal drugs used still need to be investigated. Joining us now to discuss this further is Angelo Pinto. He's a criminal justice legal advocate and campaign manager for the Juvenile Justice Project. Thanks so much for joining us, Angelo.
Thank you for having me.
All right, talk about this. He wants a moratorium because we witnessed all of these botched executions.
Definitely.
Absolutely horrifying, whether or not you believe in capital punishment or not. What is the status of what it would take to issue a real moratorium and just put them all on hold?
Well, I mean, I think it's a decision that the Attorney General can make. If he sees that what's taking place shouldn't take place, he can step in and make a decision. I mean, because the Supreme Court is grappling with this decision and executions can still take place in the meantime, it makes sense to do so, as opposed to risking individuals' lives from, looking like what happened in the Lockett case,
Right, that one of the executions that went wrong because of the injection of lethal drugs. And of course, this whole debate has been over the actual combination of what constitutes the drugs, and the manufacturers won't tell anybody what really makes up the drugs, and so it's hard to regulate it. And basically, Holder is saying, well, we need to figure this out.
Yes, and I mean, I think it's even a bit more complex than that. I mean, I think when you talk about the death penalty, it's something that historically folks have been at odds with, whether or not this should happen, whether or not we should continue the practice. And many countries around the world, most countries around the world have said this is something they're not going to continue to do.
It's too barbaric.
For ethical practices, exactly, ethical reasons.
Well, we know that, there are staunch advocates of the death penalty here in the United States. That's why it continues to exist. Some states, more than others, obviously. You'll see more executions, perhaps in a place like Texas. And some states have outlawed the death penalty altogether. Talk to me, though, about whether or not it even is a deterrent to crime, because you'll see a lot of people that are on death row who are convicted of murders, but some of them have even, been exonerated, and DNA evidence has proven that they didn't even do what they are behind bars for.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not a deterrent. If you just look at the statistics of the individuals who commit murder, in many instances it's increased. So there's no evidence that the death penalty is making folks stop engaging in capital crimes, right? But the other piece is this piece about punishment. I think for a long time in the United States history, we've believed that punishment reduces crime, this punishment paradigm. And the reality is that that is not the case for capital crimes or lesser crimes. Punishment has not proven to reduce crimes. There's other ways that have been proven to be more effective, whether it's rehabilitation, alternative to incarceration. So we should look into that.
And we also know it's more expensive to execute someone than it is to give them life in prison without the possibility of parole. So economically, there's that. Talk to me, though, also about the fact that a lot of the folks that are on death row and a lot of the folks that are behind bars in general are disproportionately, in regard to the general population here in the United States, black.
Well,
or minorities.
Definitely. And I mean, I think that's also the undercurrent of what Eric Holder is saying. I mean, Eric Holder has time and time again come out with regards to issues around the criminal justice system. I don't think it's simply because he thinks these issues are important, but because there's a racial component to these issues. I think when you look at the number of individuals on death row, the United States, black folks make about 14% of the population, but about 34% of the individuals on death row. The other piece that's interesting when you look on the back end of it, folks are often receive capital sentences if the victim is white. So there's all these racial dynamics when you look at the death penalty that I think gives Eric Holder even more reason to have pause.
And we've recently sort of saw the flip side of that when that isn't true with cases in, Ferguson and Garner. Not in terms of capital punishment, but in terms of...
You don't even get an indictment.
And exoneration, just really briefly, a lot of folks that have been sitting on death row, they've got new evidence, new ways of testing that they did not do it.
Definitely. And I mean, I think there have been some statistics floating around that say there's been about 140 exonerations since 1972 or so. And at that time, between 1972 to about 1992, you saw about 3 exonerations a year. From 1992 to about now, you've seen it jump to 5 exonerations a year. So the science has really proven that we can take a look at certain cases, DNA evidence, and determine if someone is innocent or not. And I think that's another reason that the Attorney General has said, hold on, wait, let's take a pause here and reevaluate what we're doing.
Definitely wants to leave a mark on this before he vacates his office. All right, that's all we have time for. Angelo Pinto, thank you so much for joining us on Arise News Weekend. Still ahead, the rise in the fight to end violence against women. You're watching Arise News Weekend.